Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific poets with us today. Kim will read first, and then Clive. Kim Dower, former City Poet Laureate for West Hollywood, California, is the author of 5 highly acclaimed collections of poetry. I wore this dress today for you, Mom. The Gold Ippy Award-winning Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's Grave, as well as Air Kissing on Mars, Slice of Moon, and Last Train to the Missing Planet. Dower's poems featured on Garrison Keillor's The Writer's Almanac and Ted Koozer's American Life in Poetry, as well as many journals and anthologies. She teaches poetry workshops for Antioch University, UCLA Extension, West Hollywood Library, and the Hollywood LGBT Senior Citizen. Here's an astonishing poet, Kim Dower.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here on this very rainy Los Angeles day. So I just want to say, I don't know when this is airing. If it's live, then it's very appropriate. But I dedicate this reading today to Charles Simic, who we lost yesterday, a great tragic loss to the poetry world and to the world in general. He was one of my favorite poets, and one of his books, Return to the Place Lit by a Glass of Milk. I don't have to say much more than that title to show what a brilliant poet he was, just the title alone. Anyway, goodbye to Mr. Simic, and thank you for all the work that you gave the world. So thank you, Harry, for having me on your show. It's an honor. And I decided, I started looking through all my books to choose my playlist, as we say, but I think I'm going to read everything from my book, I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom. I mean, not everything, though you can see I started to choose poems and I ended up really going a little wild. So I'll just read, I'll read what I have time to read and then I'll be quiet. But anyway, this book is dear to my heart because it's a compilation of poems about being a mother, having a mother. And of course, we all had a mother at one point or another. And although my mother's been gone for 11 years now, she keeps finding her way into my poems, for better or for worse. So, but a lot of the poems in this book, we always say, or I always say, poems are not necessarily autobiographical. And people forget that, but they're really not. We poets get to make things up too. So I'm going to start with a little teeny poem called She's Never Trusted Happiness. Maybe it was something her mother said one morning as the young girl dipped her donut into a glass of whole milk. Powdered sugar still on her lips, her mother tells her, "Don't get used to this." When I read that, I often get people coming over to me later saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Your mother sounds horrible." And, the truth is we never had donuts and milk, and that never happened. But you see, this is the joy of poetry. Things come to you and you don't really know where or how, and you're very thrilled because that poem makes me seem much more interesting than I am. So the book is about all kinds of mothers. And this poem is called Different Mothers. I've read about the ones who garden, teach their children to cut a rose just above the thorns, so a fresh bud will pop up like toast in time for breakfast. These different mothers show their daughters how to plant tomato seeds in the damp earth. Tingle when the first green fruit appears, and when they explode into deep red, pick them off the vine, slice them in their sunny kitchens. These are mothers whose daughters learn through smells of lakes, weeds, pastry dough, have memories of lightning bugs in jars mothers have poked holes into. These are different mothers. I am not one. My mother didn't know about soil or earthworms. City mothers, we know about bus routes, restaurants, Broadway, the people on the 8th floor. Mine taught me to accessorize, bring the ideal hostess gift, have my keys in hand when I enter the building. I have no daughter, but my son can look anyone in the eye, tell them what he's thinking. We eat tomatoes from the grocery. Our roses are store-bought. Different mothers sound better. And I think about what might have been, calling to the birds, naming the stars, fingers locked together while hiking on hidden trails, cleaning homegrown mint before placing it in tea before bed. I'll flag a cab instead. So you can see I grew up in a city. I grew up in New York. And even though I've been out in Los Angeles, California for 40 years, New York is so deep in me that a lot of my poems come from those days. And I also, as so many of us, I was deeply close to my grandmother, who I called Nana, and she was a great part of my upbringing. So this is a poem probably today, sometimes I read this and people say, wow, your grandmother gave you Dubonnet. But this is in the days where you could do things like that and you weren't arrested for it. So this poem is called Dubonnet. For those of you who know what Dubonnet is, it's alcohol. It's light like wine, but my grandmother would drink it every night, a glass. Dubonnet. My grandmother would sip a juice glass of Dubonnet, dark purplish red, color of her identical twin sister's lips, the one who stayed behind in Russia. Every night as she prepared the roast, Mike Douglas blasting on the television, my grandfather snoring, the apartment a swirl of garlic, chicken fat, boiled secrets, longing flooding the rooms like sunlight. Once she offered me a taste. Some people like it with a twist of lemon, but I like it plain. I was 7. My tongue burned through the sweetness. I floated into the next room without moving. I would dress up in her black cape, sequined ladybug pin, clump around in her tiny pumps. She was the size of Thumbelina. I remember the warm baths, splashes of Jeanette, the pink Chanel bathrobe, photo of them as girls hanging in the dark hallway. My grandmother told me her name just once, Tanya, this identical her, living on the other side of the world, another Nana, saying goodnight to another me. I must have a lot of relatives in Ukraine. I don't know who they are because this was a few generations ago, but it's amazing to think about my ancestry and, her twin sister and the fact that there are women my age who I'm related to. It's just all terrifying in a way. This poem called Game Over, those of us who write poetry, we know that ideas come to us at the weirdest times. And this poem was happening at a ball game. I mean, I was thinking of it. I was thinking of writing it as this was happening. And this is the poem that came out. It's called Game Over. I squirted too much mustard on my hot dog and now I can't eat it. I tell my friend at the game. Well, that's why God made napkins, he tells me. Wipe it off. I tell him I knew God made mustard, but I didn't know he also made napkins. I tell him once the mustard gets soaked up by the bun, it's game over. Even napkins won't help. He's disturbed. I can see in his face he's mad. I wasted a perfectly decent hot dog. And worse, now I'm doubting God. When did you stop believing in him? He asks me, his face twisted like the pretzel I'm about to put mustard on. Did I ever believe in God? Was God peeking through the window up there in Laurel Canyon when my son was conceived? Was he in my belly when they sliced it open so they could lift my baby out of his warm, private ocean? Was God in my son's hands when he pitched a perfect game at the pan? My friend's still talking. I was an altar boy, he continues. You don't forget the Eucharist. Wearing the crisp cassock, snuffing out candles as the priest consecrates bread and wine. You don't forget ringing the bells until someone you love dies. Then it's game over. He tells me these things, our shoulders touching as Manny hits deep into left field. The men on base run their hearts out. Thousands in the stands praying, please, God, please get the run, win the game. As the mustard hardens on my cold dog, bun stiff, I slip it under my seat with God's blessing as the first man slides safely to home. It's what's fun about this poem is, many of us will show a poem to a colleague, to another poet, and just say, do I have it all here? What's going on? So one of my great friends and mentors was another wonderful poet who passed away named Thomas Lux. I had sent him this poem. The original poem was I squirted too much ketchup on my hot dog because I personally use ketchup on my hot dog. I don't use mustard. And he wrote me back and he said, Kim, fruitcake. No one puts ketchup on their hot dogs. It's got to be mustard. And I was very upset about that critique. I had to think, what am I going to do about this? And then I thought about it. You can spend a month thinking about a word to put in a poem. And I realized that mustard would actually harden in a better way than ketchup would. And it would get that crusty feeling. So it wasn't a matter of what did I really put on my hot dog. It was a matter of what worked best for the poem. So I just wanted to tell you that little anecdote about my choice. But I do use ketchup on my hot dog, just if anyone cares, just so you know.
Your friend is the fruitcase. We all use ketchup on our hot dogs.
Is that Clive?
Yes, that's Clive.
I'm so glad you say this, Clive. I found it was very rude that he criticized my condiment. All right. Well, glad to have you there. I don't see you, but
I can't get my camera to work.
Oh my!
I tested it last night. My computer guy has a camera fix program, and I ran it last night. It was doing fine. I can try it again.
All right. Well, you have a little while to figure it out, but I guess I should move along. The time goes fast, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Have you read your poem about the unruly aura?
Oh, do you like that poem?
I love that poem. I'm a New Age guy myself. I love auras and all that, but we can get a little carried away, a little arrogant about it. And you made the aura into like this hungry animal. I just love that.
Thank you. It's not in this book, and I would have to get up and go find it, but I appreciate your liking that poem. I'll read another one, but this poem is called Bottled Water. I go to the corner liquor store for a bottle of water. Middle of a hectic day, must get out of the office, stop making decisions, quit obsessing. Does my blue skirt clash with my hot pink flats? Should I get my mother a caregiver or just put her in a home? And I pull open the glass refrigerator door and confronted by brands, Arrowhead, Glitter Geyser, Deer Park, Spring, Summer, Winter Water, and clearly the bosses of bottled water, real water, and smart water. How different will they taste? If I drink smart water, will I raise my IQ, but be less authentic? If I choose real water, will I no longer deny the truth, but will I attract confused, needy people who will take advantage of my realness by dumping their problems on me? And will I be too stupid to help them sort through their murky dilemmas? I take no chances. Buy them both, sparkling smart, purified real, drain both bottles. Look around to see, is anyone watching? I'm now brilliantly hydrated, both real and smart. My insides bubble with compassion and intelligence as I walk the streets with a new swagger, knowing the world is mine. And I'll tell you what makes me so happy about that poem is Garrison Keillor picked it when it was first published, and he read it on the Writer's Almanac. And apparently, an 8th grade teacher in Missoula, Montana, heard him, and she had an honors English 8th grade class, and she handed it out, and they did a Zoom with me to talk about the poem because half the class thought it was funny and half the class thought it was very serious. And the winners were going to win something. And, you know, of course, it's funny and serious, right? But it was my happiest moment as a poet was talking to these 13-year-olds about this. So, you know, we all are asked the question, how was your weekend on Monday? By people who really don't care how our weekend was at all, but it's the polite thing to do. So I particularly find it oppressive at a doctor's appointment, you know, you just want to get in and out. And so this poem I wrote about such an experience, oftentimes the title of my poems blend into as the first line. So the title is the first line. How was your weekend? The lab technician asks me as she sticks the needle in my vein. Routine physical, blood rushing up the tube as if being chased out of my body. Fine, I tell her. All good, really good. Did some good things. Saw some people, ate out, got rid of shoes I haven't worn in years. Craved ice cream, but I had no one to go with. So I went by myself, embarrassed, ordering mint chip cone alone in the middle of a Saturday. Got over it when I took a bite, euphoric, no longer caring that my son was too old to take for ice cream. Wrote a letter to my dead mother, but couldn't read it at her grave because we cremated her. So I read it sitting at the kitchen table, a photo of her propped up in front of me. Sounds amazing, she says, my blood still flowing up the tube. New one now as I'd filled up the first. Where will they send my blood? And how do they test for all the things they test for? And what if they discover I have one of a million diseases one could have? Something to confine me to bed for as many days, weekends as I have left on this earth. Or what if they find nothing? Will I start to take pictures of my food like a friend of mine does? He takes pictures of what he's about to eat. So he'll remember what he put in his body. So if something goes wrong, he'll know it was the yellowtail swimming in lime sauce or the ginger sorbet with one proud blackberry perched on top. He keeps files of photos so he'll never forget what he tasted, what filled him. I want to taste the blood being drawn from my arm. Wonder if it would taste the same as my mother's. What did you do this weekend? She asks, forgetting she already asked. I had an ice cream cone, I tell her, took a picture of it before it started to melt, licked a drop of blood still warm from a new cut, read a letter to my mother at her grave. So, Harry, I don't know. It's already 1:26. Do you want me to stop?
Why don't you go about 5 more minutes and then we'll bring Clive in.
Okie dokie. So the book, as you can see, it has different kinds of poems all about motherhood, but also my mother was suffering from dementia, and it was tough there. And I wrote a lot of poems in this book about her sort of downward spiraling and my relationship with her. And here's one of those poems. It's called The People in the Health Food Store. The people in the health food store don't look healthy, which is why they're here. I'm here to get carrot chips, craving crunch, flavor after visiting my mother at the home, where flavor only appears in faint whiffs of memory, where people in wheelchairs suspiciously eye the applesauce on their trays delivered by chubby nurses in red scrubs, pictures of ponies or baby elephants stitched onto pockets that contain their syringes and keys to the lounge. The people in the health food store look dirty, wear spandex, have spaces between their teeth, prowl the aisles for natural supplements, inner peace, Ola Lola energy drinks, so only the other losers will die, not them. Not after they cleanse their bodies of all impurities, destroy lingering negative thoughts. What if my baby never learns to talk? What if I suddenly forget how to walk? What if the earth sucks me deep into hell, like the hell my mother lives in? Where when I visit, she asks me, who put me here? When did this happen? It was only yesterday she sipped martinis on the rooftops of Manhattan. So it's no wonder I run for the health food store, fill my basket with miracle cream to rub in every pore, stock up on Wrinkle Warrior, buy a year's supply of brain enhancers. So when it's my turn to stare out the window wearing floral patterned daytime pajamas, I'll remember who I am, who I was, who I once loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I love your poetry. I always love poems about the mother. I had a great mom, and it's also about you, as you mentioned earlier, and your love of baseball and health food stores. You have such a deep resonance in your poetry. You have such clarity and precision. So I'm real pleased to hear your poetry and to meet you. You're a wonder. So thank you very much, Kim. Well, here's what I would like to do, if I may. I would just like to talk for a minute or two with Kim, just to find out a little bit more about her, if that's okay
Great.
with you, Kim.
Sure, that's great, Harry.
First of all, when did you write your first poem?
I wrote my first poem in the 3rd grade, and it was a little rhyming poem for Career Week. Remember Career Week? And I stood on the stage and I said, when I grow up, a nurse I'll be, a better one you'll never see. Whenever needed, night or day, just call me. I'll be on my way.
That's great. You know, one question that people ask me a lot, and I'm sure they ask you, is I'll give you 2 questions, and then maybe you could answer the second question. The first question is always, what's the difference between poetry and prose? And the second question is, what is poetry? So very briefly, if you could let us and all the watchers know what you feel poetry is.
Well, poetry, T.S. Eliot, I just have to, I don't want to sound pretentious, but he says it's the most concise form of language. So that's what we strive for as poets, the most concise form of language, which means say it clearly as quickly as possible. You don't have, like with prose, time to really expand, think. You don't have all the additional toolbox that you have with poetry. With poetry, we have a different toolbox. We use line breaks, we use music, we use different things to create the words. And, someone else said poetry is like dancing, prose is like hiking, so it's quick. It has to have rhythm. I tell my students, and it's all because I was told, you must read your poems aloud. You'll know if they're too wordy. You'll know what needs to come out. And they should sing. They should have music to them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. It's tough for me sometimes because a lot of my poems are narrative, which means they tell stories. And I have to edit them very heavily. And people have asked me, what's the difference? And, I say, take my poem and put it into prose and put punctuation, and you'll see the difference. And that's a great exercise for all of us to do. Toss your poem into prose, or take a block of prose and carve it into a poem, and you'll see the differences.
Why are you attracted to the poetry form, Kim?
I started writing poems in high school, like so many kids do in our journals. They just looked like poems. A poem tells you what it wants to look like on the page. It wants to be a couplet, or it wants to be a block, or it wants to be tercets. A poem will tell you how it should look, kind of. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but when I went, I was very lucky, blessed, actually, that my first year at college, Emerson College in the early 70s, I had Thomas Lux as a teacher. I took a class called Introduction to Creative Writing. It was an elective, and we were all babies, really. And he was a very unusual teacher then. He changed over the years, but he would declare us all poets. You're all poets, but you're not allowed to use cliches. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. And I felt like part of a club. I felt like this was my higher calling because he really created that atmosphere. But I remember writing my first, what I would call serious poems, and that I would take them home and work on them and work on them and work on them. And someone at the time said to me, you're really lucky because no matter what happens in your life, you'll always have these poems for yourself. You'll always have this thing to work on, to strive for. And I was only 18 at the time, but she's right. No matter what is happening in life, I have my poems. So I think I'm attracted to, your question was what attracts me to this form. I just naturally gravitate toward it. I love it. I love reading poetry. I love, I see you have a lot of William Carlos Williams on your promo as the show begins. No ideas, but in things. It really keeps me focused. And I teach that a lot. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Well, what depends on it? Our ability to see it and record it. That's what depends on it. So I feel like a journalist in life. All poets are. We have to see and report on something in a different way that's never been reported. And it's an honor and a calling. And it's open to everyone.
And how long have you lived in LA?
I've lived in LA. Well, wow, it's like 45 years. I came here when I was 25 years old, and from New York and then Boston to LA. So I've lived here a very long time. And it's, I love it.
We've gone through a lot of changes. I was born in 1940, and in the 60s, the women's movement, civil rights movement, Chicano movement, the LGBT movement, et cetera, trans. And so we've seen a lot of changes for the better in our society. And it's not the old traditional poetry, yet we've all of us poets who have worked hard at our craft have, I would assume, I know I have, learned the tradition, and we keep learning, realizing there's more that we haven't learned. And so we keep learning. What would you say that we should be talking about when we talk about poetry in our time?
I would say that the goal of poetry, I mean, first of all, you write, you don't have a goal. You're not writing for an audience. At least I'm not. I just sit down and I write. I can't think about who this is going to go to or affect. It's a very personal thing, as you know. And then after your own emotions and visions and recollections and reporting come out, then your job is to craft the poem so that it can appeal and connect to a wide audience and stand by itself, stand alone. But I do think, as you're saying, about what's important about it now or different. And there is a lot to think about. There's certain language that you can't use in a poem anymore that you used to be able to use. I mean, certain words that are just not acceptable anymore. I won't even say what they are, but they're in poems that we know and love, including Allen Ginsberg's poems and William Carlos Williams' poems. There's language in poems that, poems written in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that you have to be careful of now. There's a new world. There's a new language. There are new ears. And you do want to hope that your poems are relatable to a wide group, not just your own group. And that's a trick. I mean, I can read Ocean Vuong's poetry and love it, and I'm not Vietnamese and I didn't grow up in Vietnam. But the things that he's saying about his experiences and his own mother and grandmother and all of this, I can relate to. I hope that the same is true for my poetry, but I think it's more, I would answer this question that the real importance is not what we write, because we can only write what we write, what we know and what we have to say. But as a teacher, I've learned to bring in poetry by a diverse group of poets. I can no longer just bring in, a Stephen Dunn poem and a Thomas Lux poem and a William Carlos Williams poem and even Emily Dickinson, or you have to mix it up. You have to have a mix of women, men, different ethnic groups. You have to show that poetry is being written by a diverse group of people so everyone can relate in the class. I've learned that. And I can't change what I write, but I can certainly be more diverse in what I teach. I think does that answer your question?
That was very clear and very deep. Another question is, what would you say to a young woman who's sitting down to write her first poem in terms of what she should focus on or what she may focus on that you think would be helpful to her?
Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Don't worry about someone reading it and finding out something about you. Write as though no one will ever read it, and edit as though everyone will.
And when you sit down to write a poem, do you start with an idea, an image, words? What is it that comes to you? Something that you see? What do you begin with?
All of those things. It can be reading a headline in a newspaper. I read a headline, James Garner dead, and I happen to have loved James Garner. And I went right to my computer and I wrote, ode to James Garner. And all these things came back from the 60s and the movies I used to sneak off to see when I was in junior high school and how we all had crushes on him. And Doris Day, it led me to a poem that I really like in this book. So it can be a headline. I drive and I listen to KNX radio, which is not the most healthy thing to do. No offense to KNX radio, but it's news all the time. And I get a ton of headlines from them. And once I was driving and they said they're taking chocolate milk off the menu in public schools. And I thought, oh, wow, I love you, KNX radio. I went home and I wrote the poem, they're taking chocolate milk off the menu. What's next? And then my favorite was an LA Times headline that said the nudists are getting ready to, and they were clearing out this nudist camp in Palm Springs. And again, it was like, oh, thank you. The nudists are getting ready to pack. What do the nudists pack when the nudists get ready to pack? So that was great. It can be, I'm in my garden and I'm watering my roses, and my father, who's been dead 20 years, literally came through me once. I could feel him coming through my body, and because he wanted to be with those roses. He was so happy I had roses, and it was so overwhelming. I came upstairs and I wrote a poem called Thirsty about my father. So it can be a feeling that comes through me from nowhere, a headline I read, conversations. Oh, I love listening to people's conversations and just taking a line of dialogue. Oh my God, there's Clive coming through in this most crazy halfway way. Anyway, all different ways, Harry. I write for all different reasons, all different ways.
Well, Clive, we can see you, and we don't have a lot of time left. We have about 7 or 8 minutes left. But if you would like to, I don't know if there's a way you can turn your image so that we can see you without getting seasick. If not, we'll put up with this, and this will be part of our program. I've learned wabi sabi, accept the imperfections as I grow older, and especially on Zoom. So here's Clive Matson. Can you hear me, Clive? No? All right. Well, we've tried our best. We've tried our best to get Clive on the show. So we will contact you, Clive, the next time we do a show. We have an opening and see if you're available. Yes?
Sorry, we're going to try one more thing here. Clive, can you unmute? We're trying. I prompted him to unmute, so at the very least, we can get a couple of words in from Clive. Well, that's a great smile, regardless.
Sideways, silent, and smiling.
That's your next poem, Kim.
Tell the truth, but tell it slant.
Really? There you go. I think Clive is he's a visual metaphor at the moment.
Correct.
All right, let's say we've done our best.
Wait. I think we've done it. Clive, can we hear you?
Hi, you guys. How do I look sideways?
We've seen you better standing up, okay?
All right, Clive, if you have a poem or two, we have about 5 minutes left if you would like to read a poem or two.
Okay, here's one I did lately that I like quite a bit. It's called Flack Back. God is love if you're drugged or if you're not drugged. Ugh, have another puff. When did you get out of hell? Asks Patty's mom. Rosy cheeks smoothed over with petroleum products, pockmarks and liver spots disguised and beautified. Hanging by a thread, and the thread's unraveling. Oh, those awards and emblems for the immune systems. They work such a lot, double time, overtime, 24/7. It is what it is. Sun at midday zenith. Huh? Take one hit of acid, okay? Get the message, hang up the phone. Blows the filters away and your sight's restored. I never went to hell, says Patty, outraged. Oh yeah, well, you're right. We built hell up around you. It is what it is. Sun at midday zenith. Chemical goop, chemical soup. Dichlorofluoromethane and polypropylene on top. one level down. Dioxin, nanoplastics, carbon 8-chain forever molecules, perchlorate and sodium glyphosate, somewhere under the paint, leaking out their corroding cells. It is what it is, sun at midday zenith. 200 plus chemicals and pesticides in our bloodstreams not there before 1910, plus a few unidentified. Oh, you're not feeling so good? Oh, they have a pill for that, another one for side effects, one more for the second tier. Ugh, have another puff. The hippies were right. Study of environment poisons 1 year out of the dark ages. Maybe 2. 8 mutations, enough to turn a healthy cell to cancer. 1 atom plutonium is nice and will suffice, makes dozens. No pill for that. Thanks everyone, US, Russia, France, China, Pakistan, North Korea. I've already got my plutonium quota, 10 or 15 atoms from the several metric tons you poured into the atmosphere. Have another puff. Ugh. Plutonium in linoleum and now petroleum. The hippies were right. Natural poets of the uncertain bridge, natural poets of the chaos future, natural poets of the chaos today. God is love, if you're drugged or if you're not drugged. Ugh, have another puff. Atonal music in 20th century noticed something's wrong. Back then, no results. Now, results. Conscience-ectomy tops the list. No end to the number of ills. You'll get no flack back on that. Stumbling into the 6th mass extinction, rolling joints, and downing pills. So, I've done a lot of love poems, and thinking about this reading, I thought, oh, I should get those together. And I started reading them, and I kind of couldn't stop. So I'd like to read one more if I still have a minute. Do I have a couple minutes?
Yes.
Stuff ooze in those orifices. Dampen your senses. Shut down those double agents. I want to wrap you in layered wool. Let no cherimoya or hyacinth seep in, no magnolia or rose ooze. I want you to know only me. You see that proud walk, high breasts, young woman? That clean line, stark slate young man's cheek? What's your nostril smelling? Your mouth tasting? Did you add to your stance that hand on hip and lean in lust's corolla? No, only me. Lavender leaking in portends sideways glance and tug of skin beneath unbuttoned cotton, hip bone moving toward your palm. Let it signify me, only me, me. Isn't this articulated arm enough? These flat rope muscles weaving across my back? The grand kinky fan of chestnut hair when strands all lift a canopy over bare shoulders. This pink labia swells only for you. This flesh warps only to your hand's desire. These lyrics, I love you so much, come flooding out my throat. Can't they be the only notes in your labyrinths? Must they recline alongside the coolest tones ever whispered in your ear? Oh, frailty, blare my vanity? What could ensnare this most unlikely, most gnarly, impossible wish? Any scent whispers gorgeous wrinkles on a lady's face. Any huff protein forewarns thighs of a svelte biker by natural course. The softness of my underbreast when you lift and kiss one aureole, then the other, counts how many touches hover nascent nearby. Once we walked under a sky with no horizon, and our kiss opened doors. The ground fell away, and we entered floating worlds where light filters blew through watery air, and in all their fetid smell and abundant ways, the flowers bloom. Through my chakras, a rumbling bass tone joins the undertow when you groan, how fine this is. And with one reverb from another's voice, your eyes disseminate seeds and sparklets. New eyes alert aside, attention hitches, and the soft wind futures nubile murmuring on your cheek. Stop flirting. You create 2 touches when you notice 1, 4 when 2. That shoulder roll, the same curve of a vagina opening, the porcelain cup on your lips foretastes rims of smegma nectar. Oh, stop. Stop your flirting. Quadruple pain, acid spittle of avenging demons, quadruple rage. Stop. Stop. Stop your flirting.
Thank you very much, Clyde. That was a wonderful poem to end with. This has been quite the show, and we've dealt with it the best we can. So I want to thank you both. You're both marvelous poets. And I just want to give one last piece. Next Tuesday, the splendid actors Corinne Conley, Helen Richmond, Kay Wiseman, and I, Harry Northup, will read from the marvelous poetry book, The Woman I Kept to Myself, by Julia Alvarez. And we have to wrap up the show, so thank you very much, Kim and Clive. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.